Okay. I think we're live, presumably on a brand new event that nobody has clicked on accept. So we'll see if people pop in. If anybody's in, please jump in the chat. We had a little bit of a snafu. I think AI would have solved this. Matt did not, but I set myself up for failure today and
Nice.
didn't reconnect my LinkedIn appropriately. But we're here. So, Nick Nyberg, it's awesome to have you on. I'm sorry I stole a few minutes from you for our chat, but we'll still go to the top of the hour for anybody that's connected. So, Nyberg, why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody who you are and what you do for a living these days?
Sure. So Nick Nyberg, I started one of the companies that's now part of Integris IT, one of the largest MSPs in the country currently. They acquired Iconic IT, which is where I met Matt Lee. He was we worked together. And before that, I started an MSP called Live Consulting in the early 2000s. So I'm a veteran of the MSP space. I'm a veteran in the HCG peer groups and have done a lot of analysis of other MSPs. So I left that world after the transition into Integris, and now I work as the head of technology at an acquisitions company. So we're acquiring digital marketing companies and rolling them up and selling them off. Called Ava. It's been a fantastic journey, and I feel like the financial M&A side was always kind of a weak spot of mine. So super excited to be there and super excited to reconnect and see you again.
Yeah, man. So
I
for
brought a
others that
beard,
don't
but
know,
you never
but
will.
he did bring the beard with him. That was part of the initial antics that would have been here had we not unfortunately watched Matt Lee screw up an epic failure. But we're here. So, one of the things I want to touch on is like, Nyberg, you guys came and did a SWOT audit of our MSP a long, long time ago, 4.5, 5 years before the merger that ultimately became Iconic, that then rolled up to become Integris. And so you've been in this game, a long time and been analyzing other businesses and MSPs. And the reason I bring this up is I don't think we can talk about the future of tech and the future of where we're going without kind of talking about where we've come from, you know what I mean, and where we've
Absolutely.
been. I think that's like most things in life. But that said, I want you to put your head back on. If you were ChatGPT, I'd ask you to assume the persona of Nick Nyberg, circa 2011, 2010. You know, we all came from being break fix companies to become MSPs to become, what we were. But looking back then, talk about the state of tech and what was the value proposition for an MSP those days, in your words?
Man, value proposition for an MSP back then was just outsourced support. I mean, it was just the human element. There wasn't necessarily the package of products that came along with it back then. It wasn't an entire suite. It was support. It was just the human element. It was just somebody to call when something went wrong that you could ask the question, a simple question to, and get a personalized answer back to, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think if we talk about how that evolved over time, forward looking, you had to evolve, and that's why we all evolved as an MSP. That's why we started to package in different deals. And there's certain things that make sense at economies of scale, but there's also things that just make sense to grow and evolve the company. So you're providing the most value to those people. So yeah, it's all about the humans. It's human to
I
human connections, and that's what MSPs offer. You know,
I used to joke about this, and I said, this phase, like till the last, till VCIO services came to be and VCISO and those type of things, like that phase was the "I'll keep your pooter working" phase, right? And I don't mean to be diminutive or negative about it, but like it was that partner to call when something went bad, and when we transitioned into becoming, more MSP focused instead of break fix, it was I'll know all the things to do to keep the pooter working. I'll do all those things you normally would say no to, and I'll do those on a constant basis, right? I'll do the disk defrags and whatever that became over time, right? Joking aside.
remember the good old days when viruses were just pop-ups and they were just
Yeah, in a
advertising.
nuisance. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
I'll install that for you.
yeah, no problem. I've got you taking care of it. What's an incident? What's this? But you look at it, and I bring that up to say tech used to be and always seems to be in history, not just here. It starts out rough and raw and hard and infrastructural, and it moves to more systemic and platform. Look at tractors, right? Like in the early days of being a farmhand, you had mules, you could hook them up to do the plow, and you get a little extra horsepower, joking aside. But like ultimately, when a tractor came, it was not easy to manage. It broke down. They had all kinds of challenges, took experts, but the workload value was worth it, right? And
Absolutely.
then you get to where it's John Deere and you have GPS and it just drives the damn tractor around for you for the most part. And you get into a very normalized, usable, functional tool that's endemic. And it actually caused everyone to move from their farm where you had 80 or 90% of the population at the turn of the century living in farms to literally cities were born overnight, right? Like because of this, because a tractor could do 93 kids worth of workload, right? Like ultimately. And
Yeah.
I'd say all that to say in our tech world, are things getting simpler? Is the first question, right? Are we seeing that type of simplification of technology in our work, in our 15 years or so
Oh,
touching tech? Have we seen that?
there's no doubt about it. Every vendor that's out there is selling, this is how you save more time. This is how we've automated backups. This is how we've automated, don't look at disk defrags anymore. We got that automated. And you start with the automation of the simple that are
Yep.
really easy to script. There's an old t-shirt back in the day that you could get that, I'm going to replace you with a tiny shell script, right? And there's
That's so good.
it's those simple things that the things you used to have to call the knock in just to reboot a service in the middle of the night because some service wasn't down. And I mean,
Yeah.
those things we don't even think about anymore because it's just automated. Sure, if it reboots 1,000 times, we're going to go look at it and figure something
Right.
out. But I mean, it starts with something that simple, and it evolves into what ChatGPT and what we're looking at the future of AI, and you know people on Instagram that are full AI, people on TikTok that are full AI. Like people are socially following fully rendered people that aren't even
Yeah.
like it's amazing how far it's gone and the evolution and the MSP space is going to continue to have to adapt or die.
Yeah,
Um,
true story. I mean, I think you said it earlier in the pre-stream. We were talking about, the commoditization, right? I feel like, hey, what's up, Tom? It's good to see you, buddy. Tom Bishop, welcome. People, you feel like the things that we do because of those scripting the easy, because of I automate this because I can, right? And as you see that, you're going from a number of variables. Let's just put it in tech perspective. Server 2003, 3R2, 8, 8R2, 12, 12R2, 16, 19, 20, Forest Function 2003, 2008, 2012, 2016 now becomes Graph API, right? Like I just want to understate, I suppose, or overstate the just how normalized the variables are getting, right? And that they are becoming so the same and so commoditizing that you know Tony Miller quite well, right? You've spent many years with him. He was
I know
always
that
the
guy.
yin to your yang, right? And similar to mine. But I come up with this term of saying, at some point the plate spinning stuff we do as an MSP has to go away, and we have to shift to advisory. We have to shift to how we teach people to beat each other with the same hockey sticks, right? How does this team beat that team? We have to do stuff like that. And it's more business focused and it's more sales focused and enablement of our partners and our clients, right? And it's that kind of stuff. But I think that shift is really going to be even more precipitated. But Tony would never let me use the term plate spinners. I said, "Why, Tony?" He said, "Because of all the fucking plate spinners, Matt." Fair. That's a fair argument.
Sometimes you just can't argue with Tony.
It's a true story. Most of the time, I can't argue with Tony. He comes pretty direct with his thought processes. But all of that saying, I think MSPs are seeing the commoditization of stuff just working, right? I joke about it, but even back in the Choose days, the first couple of partners we brought over to a modern office, right, that were living on Azure the same way we live, right, from the day you first met me as we went into Azure AD binding and all of those things, they fired us. And their argument was, well, you don't add any value. Stuff just works. We don't have any of the computer problems we used to have, and it's built in
Right.
now. If I leave, it still works. Well,
Yep.
true. Dang. So how do you add that value? And so I think that that's an interesting shift. But all along that, I want to kind of target in on what the show is supposed to be about is like what kind of automation changes have you seen from that first persona, Nick Nyberg, running sales, trying to drive sales to an MSP business, Oh yeah, can't miss the Bob Coppage law. If you've heard Bob's law, it just says that five. I've heard it said it's 10%. Maybe he embellishes sometimes, Rowdy, but it says that 5 to 10% of IT gets commoditized each year. We've replaced that with stuff, but how did your sales platform change in selling an MSP through that time as well? Did we see more and more automations? Like, help me understand that delta over your
Absolutely.
decade of time.
And let me, I'll couple that with a story of today's world too. But you got to think about all the way that people connect with sales, right? So everybody's looking to build that personal connection. You're never going to sell anything unless you build that personal connection. So how do I build that personal connection? Humans naturally find something to synergize about, right?
Sure.
I love your beard. I have a beard, or we both
as you
want
as
MSPs,
you
right?
point to the beard prop sitting behind you, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. No, I got you.
Wait, you sold Russian diamonds, smuggled in through llamas, and I use sheep, whatever it is. It's a story for another day.
You promised you'd never tell about that story, man.
I did promise that. Um, but realistically, I mean, like once you build that connection, or once you have that connection, then you can actually start to talk about sales. You can start to talk about business. You're not going to ask for money before
Right.
you have that personal connection. And so one of the things that we're starting to see is that with mass data gathering, you can actually personalize those outreach messages where it used to just be spam. Now the AI is getting so good that I can say, "Hey Matt, I really enjoyed our conversation the other day. The Nike that looked like blood was dripping down the swoosh in the background of your video was amazing.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
do you have time to jump on that Zoom call that we can talk about XYZ product, right?" And so we're getting to the point where you just can't tell the difference between a true personalized, genuine, emotional connection email and a
Yep.
spam email.
Well, and let's
And
take that another step further. I actually had a platform I was looking at with Wilfredo from Black Point Cyber. Will was showing me a platform where he sent about 10 minutes of his video of him talking through certain things. They trained the AI. And then after that, he just uploaded scripts and it would make the videos that you see of that, impassioned, Matt, I love those Nikes with the really cool drip behind you without even being there. He literally just sent it a script, which means you could script it from pulling and scraping the data, catering a message, and sending that message off to your script engine to generate the video, to
yeah,
delivering that video in emotion, right? Like you could never have any human time in it at all and still deliver a similar experience to that point, just to take it another step further in thought. Yeah, it's nuts.
well, and I've always said that the commoditization of MSPs doesn't start with or it starts with the technology, but the way that you continue to win clients is the personal aspect, right?
Yeah.
The account management, getting back to people, the VCIO services or whatever that looks like. It's the human element, but with what we're seeing and the way that AI is working, like that human element is the one that's at risk right now. And so I think that the further down the line that we get and the better this technology gets, some of these questions that people are going to answer, they're either going to skip asking us because they have their own ability to ask a question that can answer them instantaneously and not answer for an email. And they can feed data back to it to say, if I have XYZ, what should I be? What is my weakest link in my security posture?
Yeah.
And
I've probably spent, speaking of GPT, I've spent probably about 10 or 12 hours now, testing things, right? Different things I'm trying to understand about its capabilities. But, one of the things I've found most valuable is an aid, right? A bit of an assistant to head you down the right path. But even
yeah,
then, it's subject to the weighting and value of the data it's actually receiving, right? Like I asked, who is Cyber Matt Lee, and I got a really cool persona of some dude named Garrett that lives in Finland, really loud about open source projects and things. But but joking aside, it's really effective for certain little research things about factual data where there's plenty of evidence about it, and it can answer questions really well. But it's not general AI, right? Before the show, you and I were talking about, what is AI, and I'm always reminded. My brother is an AI researcher. His name's Stephen Lee. And I asked him, is that spelled Stefan with a PH? And he says, no, it's with a PhD. So he's kind of a tool. God bless his heart. But it is Stephen Lee with an F. But he does a lot of research. And he was doing a presentation for DARPA about disembodied agents or training disembodied agents, meaning a robot OS that's going to eventually be in a robot, but right now it's disembodied. It's just training the brain of how to move a type of robot. And he was like pointing out how broken AI is today. A magazine bin is only a magazine bin because it's a bin that we've chosen to place magazines in. And that contextual difference is not something easily understood by these type of logic models today, right? And so it's all raw training. It's more memorization than understanding in a lot of these cases. And so as he explains that, it's just the limitations of AI are so very vast. But what's interesting about things like ChatGPT that come on the market is they really showcase very powerfully to people what the capabilities and the vision of the future could be, right? And I think a lot of those type of things. So we promised in this show to kind of fast forward 5 years. So let's try to play that game. So real quick, we'll go through a couple comments, then we'll come back to it. We've got Gary saying, "Listen, tech augmenting and not replacing people." That's almost always the case, Gary. Like as you think about that farm situation, man, everybody had to leave the farm where they got up at 6 a.m. and picked potatoes until it was time to be done and rushed the dirt off and then finally boiled and blanched them. And that was their whole existence, to going in and now working in a factory and ultimately to the creation of porn. I mean, joking aside, every single thing that is an industry today wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't replaced horses on farms, because the density of numbers of humans it would take to produce food always kind of became one to one to the farms that were supporting it, if that makes sense, right? And the scalability of that. So technology always changes stuff. And I don't think it destroys, it just changes. So I agree totally, is that tech augmenting, not replacing people. Um, Maximization of ChatGPT is in the framing and quality of questions asked. True story. I'm not sure who the LinkedIn user is. They have adequate privacy settings for this, but I would agree with that in the sense that I went through this one thought experiment. I wanted to build an email trying to talk Nick Nyberg into giving gift cards for his CEO and then asking for an expense of it back to the company as a way to deliver love from all the employees. And so I wanted to go down this path of stealing gift cards from people with their thought that they were going to be reimbursed by their company, right? And I went through and I eventually got it to do it without flagging a lot of the stuff that I was doing, right? Because that was my goal in my game, was to not flag their fraud abuse. And I did. I got it to write me 3 emails: a initial email, a follow up, and even a reimbursement form follow up, so they could feel like
Right.
they were actually getting it right. Um, but it took me a massive amount of linguistic gymnastics, if you will, to do that, in which I would have already had the knowledge to write it in English. If I did that, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
needed ChatGPT to do that. But any thoughts on that? Have you played around with GPT at all, Nyberg, very much, and kind of tried to beat it up a little in that same vein of this
A
maximization?
lot. A lot.
Yeah,
I've used it for real use cases, and I think, there's always something about the writer's block where you need to write something, you need just to start, and it's always a good start. But I completely agree with this, where it's about the framing and quality of the question to ask. But that's where it is today, right? And I absolutely agree. And it's also limited by the data set, right? I think the data set
yeah.
is pre 2021, and so
Aug 2022, I think it was August of 2022
August
was
22.
the
Okay,
latest.
so
It might have
yeah,
been, but yeah,
modern events, it's missing a lot of those type things that it could reference or talk about. But it goes back to your farm analogy. This is where it's at today, and it's a starting point. And I think what we saw in the industry was that there was a massive adoption of being able to talk to a computer naturally, and then the next 6 weeks of news is big company with $1 billion investments into this AI or this competitor or that competitor, or hey,
yeah,
Jasper already had this. We were already writing blogs, and we already
right,
did these type of things. But it's all just an incremental step to general AI. And I think that's what everybody thinks about when they talk AI. And will that be in 5 years? Doubt it. A lot of people
right,
say 2050 is before we'll have general AI. But um, it's amazing to see what this does to the farm, right? You took the people that were farming and planting seeds and pulling to, now they got to figure out a way. They got to learn a new trade. They got to go help build the tractors now, because they're not as fast or as quick as a tractor. They got to learn how to program them or drive them, or learn a new trade. So I often wonder if this is actually going to continue the separation of the entire economy of the haves and the have-nots.
yeah,
Like there's a lot of long-term implications of what this does.
You could even see in some ways, democratization though of capabilities down to the nth user, right? I mean, in the sense of if I wanted to hire a staff writer, and I joke about this, but we at Pax8 do use blog writers to help us out with some of our thoughts and ideas. Like, can you imagine translating Matt into a blog? Like, it's the worst job in the entire world. Like, it's horrible. Like, take what Matt Lee spouts out and turn it into a blog. But joking aside, we hired one that was a new one I hadn't worked with, and you could kind of tell that he just didn't really get it. I thought in that first hour of us talking about what our vision was for this blog. And I get the first result, and it was not great. I mean, it genuinely missed a lot of the understanding of EDR and XDR. It missed a couple of those things that were just real key misses, right? Like it just made it was. And I said frustratedly, I said, I bet ChatGPT does a better job at this, and it did. I genuinely just asked it, help me understand the differences for an MSP between XDR, EDR, and MDR, and help break that down for me. And the point that it got that I really wanted was the main point was MDR is not all that much delineable except for somebody's managing it that has some qualifications capabilities and maybe threat feed capabilities, right? But mostly it's just EDR being managed by someone doing log reviews. Even on CIS, I can't find a difference in the mappings of it. For the most part. But joking, a little bit, I was blown away that it did do such a succinct starter job. I think the error rate in that was very low. I agreed with most of what it said. It was just surprising to me. And I think, that does a lot of change to what that blog writer's job might be now. Right. And yeah, it's interesting. Now, I've seen equal number of failures, right? Like, I think the model is certainly not close to perfect. It's that early tractor, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if you build a human element into AI, I mean, people naturally fill in blank spaces with assumptions, and they fill the space in between their knowledge with things that may or may not be realistic, or they may not know as a fact. And so I'm not opposed to that in the language model, because what we're trying to get to, I mean, I think it should disclose that. I think you need to know where it's making shit up.
Right.
But yeah, it's the world's changing, and there's no doubt, and there's no fighting it. And people that want to argue that we'll never be replaced with robots, you're right. I think that's true. But
You
our
won't
kids,
ever replace that
those are words.
ingenuity of spirit. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's go a little off topic for a sec. So Tom asked, "What's up with the kicks in the background? What's the story behind them?" Yeah, so I got these at a conference. One of the vendors was offering to take us to a Nike by You store, and what they did was they set up a street artist at the Nike by You store, and I asked him to paint my logos, and I just kind of gave him my website and then gave him free reign, and he did an amazing job. So I've worn them once or twice. The paint doesn't hold up, so they moved to my desk, and that's where they'll stay. Yeah, that's the story behind those. Okay, so Matthew says, and let's see, I used to be condemned by people for saying AI was going to be able to produce semi-functional, debuggable code, and told it wouldn't happen in my lifetime. Well, Matthew, I can only assume you're alive, and I've actually seen it make some okay code. Not great though.
Did you see where it passed the Google senior
test?
developer?
Yeah.
It's $183,000 base salary.
Yeah. Well, the irony of that is it's anything that is super duper subjective, right? Anything that has very linear outputs and is very, very subject driven, as opposed to like object driven or objective kind of thought processes around it. Very good for AI, right? AI can do subject. Now, the interesting thing that we're not talking about too much about these things is when you're talking about, especially ChatGPT, it's a bit of a deterministic engine, right? It's a bit of summation of all of the things and say, here's what the evidence says the answer must be, which means it's probably quite calculably manipulable, right? If you had unlimited data sets and anybody could put in disinformation, you could ruin AI's validity very quickly with just all the stuff on the web, which I think is why, they tried to matriculate this data set so much, but getting a little off topic here. But I do think that, yeah, go ahead.
To Matthew's point, and I assume that ChatGPT just put in some comments in the code, and every developer was like, there it is. This guy comments his code. We got a winner hiring.
this idiot documenting what he's doing, loser.
Yeah, I think
It
that's
does
the
comment in the code though. And they've gotten better at defending against making reverse shells and all kinds of stuff that I've tried playing with. They've gotten really good at blocking out a lot of that. I know I've seen a couple people beat it to death a bit, but as we go forward in tech, though, just like going forward with that tractor scenario and how we produce food, how the world transports economy, how we have built up just in our lifetimes massive, massive, massive interoperability and interdependent systems all tied to technology, right? Like all of this stuff. As it gets, I think it gets easier, it gets more securable as time goes on. It's getting more mature. Coding practices are evolving. I've had PE firms now starting to ask about cybersecurity. Ask about, listen, what's your
about
posture
time.
like? Are you, in fact, that's a great question, man. I'll turn this on you because you're involved with some of this in the private equity and acquisition. Are you starting to see maturation in some of the questions being asked on these deals of these digital marketing organizations? Like, is
Absolutely.
it okay?
When I go into do due diligence, my job is to kill the deal. It's not to approve the deal. I'm looking for a reason to kill the deal because there's enough deals out there. There's enough money in the market that we're looking for the best and the best and the brightest, right? And so there was a BEC that we caught early on, and we asked the owners about it. They were like, "Oh yeah, we talked to Microsoft. They had us change passwords, and we're good." I'm like, Mr. Nigeria logged in this morning to your email. I could see his
Yeah,
IP address right here, and I could
yeah,
see the
yeah,
emails he sent to your vendors. And so the how naive they were, I completely killed the deal. I sent them out. And
yeah.
and if any one of us in our due diligence process hardlines a no, then the deal's done. And so we threw that one out of the hopper. And so people have to have at least a base level security before we'll even have those conversations. And furthermore, you want your multiples to go up, you want more value, then come with a mature tech stack that shows that you take security seriously, that I don't have to worry about the last 5 years of what you've done.
Yeah, 100%, man. I love that thought process. And one of these things that I like to paint a picture for, I'm on the CSA Zero Trust architecture. I'm writing some of the test questions for that. I wrote, I think my claim to fame is I have at least 3 commas and a space in there somewhere. So I'm like really cranking it on this material. But, I think if I started a company today and that company was based on Azure Active Directory, I signed into my machines managed with Intune and MIM. I did everything 100% in that one platform, and I had 1,000 different companies I wanted to assess like that. I have an instant ability to assess what settings they have set, what settings they don't have set, the maturity of their operation in a very linear fashion, right? They're either going to have these features on or they're not. They're either going to be configured this way or not. To make it easier, Microsoft even has a secure score that says here's the stuff that's on, here's the stuff that's not, and here's the score. If you
Yep.
imagine vetting a company based on that, you're now going significantly more data based, right? You're now not going as much this objective kind of just I think it's this and maybe this is qualitatively this. Nope, nope, nope. I can say you're set up like this, they're set up like that. We now have a difference in what their security posture is. I think that's a very different world. In fact, so much so that when writing the zero trust training, I got one paragraph in. It took me 2 days of arguing, right? But I got one paragraph in that says if you're starting from an identity centric, greenfield world, living in modern cloud technologies and modern platforms, the last 160 pages of this guide don't apply. Like just to let that sink in, right? Because now we're looking at it as here's the bolt, it's SAML or it's OIDC. Here's the way I'm going to connect into them. Here's our shared responsibility matrices that we're going to build. And I know I'm getting a little technical and getting a little in the weeds of it, but it just means that if I'm now looking at a company over another company, I have a real easy lens of comparison that I wouldn't have had in the stuff that you and I grew up in from a technology perspective, right? With servers and virtualization stacks and backup stacks and how they're done and what this firewall, what brand, what's turned on, how do we, the variables go instantly much more snapped to a smaller variable set, in my opinion.
Yep. Absolutely.
So that said, then the future of tech with AI and those type of capabilities, you know, what does that do to an MSP today over the next 5 years? Let's end on that next 8 minutes. I just want your thoughts on if you're an MSP or if you're a digital marketing organization. You can take either lens. What happens with that change, with things getting that much more simple and more commoditizable and scalable?
Yeah, it goes back to what one of the guests said about the 5% commoditization. I mean, that basically means in 20 years it's fully commoditized, right?
Yep.
Or I guess 5%. I guess
Two
math.
times five, that's 100 on my books. So
Yeah,
we're good. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, MSPs are constantly trying to differentiate themselves, right? And it's I don't know, it's all in the sales process now. I mean, you take 10 MSPs across any region and you look at their back end processes, their engineers, their hiring pool, like unless you start to adapt somewhere along that line, they're all the same once you get inside. I did 12 SWOT analysis of 12 MSPs in the course of 3 months, and we're all the same. Like I don't care what
That
you
was
tell me.
the grand vision afterwards. Hey, we're all the
No,
same at the end of the
we're all the
day.
same.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah.
the only difference is, the sales material and who's selling it and what they promise and how much of that promise you actually continue to deliver on. Um, it's it, I don't know. MSPs are we're not going anywhere. MSPs aren't going anywhere. There's so much need for taking care of people and outsourcing what technology is, but how much more automated can we bring, and how much easier can we get to scale the business? I mean, right now, you referenced the time and material to break fix back then. It was you can have an hour of my time for 125 bucks an hour, whatever that
Right,
looks like, and I couldn't bill or shouldn't have billed multiple people for that same hour, right?
right,
And so now we move to MSP where it's okay, we're just going to keep you up and running at set amount, right?
right.
It's going to continue to evolve where people it's not about keeping you up. Now it's about keeping you secure. Now it's about the KPIs that we meet. It's about what did we agree upon that in the sales process that I agree to provide this set of security standards and you agree to do this, and that's kind of the premise of our relationship. It's no longer about product XYZ. It's going to come down to just KPIs because
I'm going to
that's
stop
simply
you on
what.
something real quick because I think you hit on one of the most key points right there. It is a partnership. It is a two-way street. This vision of what it takes to be in technology today is much more seat at the table, right? It's significantly more. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what I'm going to do. But I can only do what I'm going to do if you're going to do the things I need you to do. As we like that becomes interdependent in a way that before a lot of executives used to think, well, I'll hand that to Nick Nyberg and team. They'll handle technology. They got this. They got this in a vacuum. We're good. We'll just be. That's not the way it is. So I just wanted to key in that you said that there is this. What is both sides of the table? What's the shared responsibility matrix? Is a conversation that MSPs aren't typically used to having in that way. And I love that you called it
Yeah.
out. So.
And I think MSPs too, if you look at some of the best in the business, they stated their target market like 100% target focused. I do credit unions from 50 to 80 people only.
Right,
And if you are if you're a CPA and you come to me and you're 50 to 80, they say no. And those are the ones that are doing the best because they've narrowed the scope of what they're able to do, and they can utilize different things, and they can grow and mature at a scale that you can't when you try to cater to everybody. If I had to start all over today, my niche would be so small. I would have a smaller team, but it would be the most profitable team that you'd ever seen.
True story. I love that you called this out too, because that's one of the other things. I make this very long hyperbolous argument on stage, but if you think about the fact that everybody's now going to have the same Microsoft Teams, the same extensible chat capabilities and capabilities to connect to software, like let's imagine everybody's fighting with the same stuff. They've got the same skates on, same hockey sticks, same size players, same all that, right? Well, how do you win? You got to coach somebody, beat that other team based on their weaknesses and the business capabilities and all of those type of things that we add value to. And I think when you start looking at what does a verticalization do to that, I went to about 7 different MSPs conferences for their customers last year. Only one of them was one that was hyper focused vertical. They were working on just title insurance and title space. Boy, the richness and depth of the business value in that conference that they put on was 10 times more than the stuff that is coming out in the general secure yourself. They were talking about how not to lose in transaction deals where there was a spoofed seller, how not, like, very, very vertical focused teaching educational valuable things of how to win as a coach. And I think that verticalization, whether it stays as, to your point, a very strategic, yeah, Tom's calling it out, a very strategy based strategic piece that you're doing because you're taking on one focus, one vendor ideal client profile, right? For those people. Or you're an MSP that says, I'm going to verticalize and I'm going to have sectors of my MSP that are highly focused on each of these verticals. And that's all they're going to do. And it's going to be a whole team. And it's going to be however that solves out. I 100% agree with you. Verticalization and knowing the client, how they win the battles they have to win to make market. It's what your jam is right now. You're buying digital marketing organizations, knowing that field quite well, verticalizing in that space and finding the winners and rolling them up to make synergies and bigger winners, right? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of the situation. But all of that is significantly more strategic. But you get the final words on it. 2 more minutes, so I want to let you finish out with your thoughts.
If I tie this back into kind of the topic at hand with ChatGPT, when we go to market and we're looking at companies, we're looking at the companies that are progressive when it comes to technology, that are progressive when it comes to AI. How can we put some of these other companies first? And those companies, they're creating more value for themselves by being a little bit cutting edge. And while it's not ironed out, nobody's got it perfect yet. What they're showing us is that they're willing to change and they're willing to adopt. And that the message behind the surface level data is that we're in this for the long term. We're not in this just to make the money today. And I think that's the same for MSPs. I think you got to look at don't just be so set in your ways that you pick out all the downsides of what could be. Continue to evolve, and you got to find a way to evolve. You got to find a way to roll this in, even if it's as simple as getting your account managers just to get their emails out quicker or something. Like find a way to integrate it today.
Here's how you break writer block. Here's a great way to start down that process. So I agree. And I think that's the biggest point. The winners are those that lend towards new technologies and understand their value from a previous lens, right? Like at some point, somebody said, hey, you know what? I'm going to keep making steam engines, right? Like at some point they said, nah, this old newfangled internal combustion stuff's never going to last. I'm sticking on steam engines, all in on Team Steam. But anyways, closing it out with Mary, putting human interaction in your business is more important now than ever. I agree totally. And what we're talking about is how do you make those humans the heroes faster using technology and things around them, right? And then unknown LinkedIn user said vertical specialization worked for me from back when we were talking about that. Nick Nyberg's if I ever started one again conversation of that. And I agree wholeheartedly. So Team Steam, buggy whip. Okay, we've gone off the rails just enough for me, and we're out of time. Nyberg, I'm sorry for stealing 12 minutes from you or 8 minutes from you from my snafu of getting this thing started. But as always, it's great seeing you, man, and I appreciate getting to chat with you. So
I
thanks for
appreciate what
bringing
you
a
do
beard
out
with
there.
you, too.
Yeah. I appreciate what you do out there. You're a huge advocate. I can't praise you enough for everything you do for this community and MSPs across, and keep fighting a good fight, man.
Always, brother.
All right.
Next
Have
time.
a good one.
Yeah.